30 defensive linemen, interior and edge, with grades equivalent to the first 3 rounds.
That's it? That's a big number.
Yeah. I mean, today we're going to take a deep dive into one of the deepest D-line classes that we've ever seen. Just 65 days until the NFL draft. Muench, you good?
I'm good, man.
So glad to hear that. Now wake me up, DJ. Things that I take a lot of pride in, and I know you do as well, Muench, is providing perspective, right? Like, most people kind of get involved in the draft. The Super Bowl's over. The college football and NFL seasons are done. They dive into the draft. People want to know, okay, like when you say, oh, this is a deep running back class, it's loaded this year, it's a great defensive line class, there's so much talent to be had. Well, give me a little perspective, right? And so I did a little bit of digging just to provide the audience, and thank you everyone who's tuned in. Like, the continued support has been amazing. The numbers keep growing. We appreciate you more than you'll ever know, truly. And please take a minute, if you haven't already, click the subscribe button, give us some likes, all the different things you need to do. I hate begging, but we got to ask. It's just how this thing works, right? But perspective, right? When we talk about this being a loaded D-line class, and I kind of laugh, Muench, right? Everyone's like, this class isn't very good. Everyone's, because you got to remember, like, all the like NFL reporters and NFL analysts and like people I'm talking to now, kind of, sending texts and giving calls, and people are kind of getting really interested in this draft class, and to a T. Everyone who's coming in fresh from the league, it's kind of like when you're a scout and now you're starting to talk to the coaches and the staff who have been coaching all season long. Everyone's like, I hear this class isn't very good. And I'm like, yeah, for TV, it's not a great draft.
Right.
Quarterbacks, the quarterbacks this year, the talking point probably starts at 4 or 5 from last year's quarterback class. Yeah, the wide receivers aren't as great as they have been. But as we've talked about a lot recently, and we will continue to talk about, like, look at the organizations that continue to win. Year after year are in the playoffs, successful organizations. They are the ones that take advantage of defensive linemen and defensive standouts in the NFL draft. And this year's defensive line group, Muench, is as good as I can remember. I'm not going to go back and say, whoa, it's as good as this class. Like, we did that with running backs. To me, it's like the depth of this group is what stands out the most, where you can get guys in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round that belong in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round. Guys that forget the rounds, guys that are actually going to contribute in different ways, shapes, and forms. Okay.
Right.
So we always do the 3-year tally. I talked about it last time. Bill Belichick, one of the things he taught me early in my career was, you can kind of rely, because some years there's a big spike, some years there's a big drop, and it reflects kind of what's going on with with the talent coming out. But if you want to get a feel, don't do 5 years, don't do 7 years, because the game changes. But 3 years, if you kind of average those and combine them. So edge class, we'll start there. Last 3 years, in the first 3 rounds, there's been an average of 13 guys drafted. Edge defenders. This year we have grades. I have grades, and we'll get to your grades and how how your evaluations differentiate from mine. But this year I've got 20 edge defenders, right? 20 with grades in the first 3 rounds. That's 7 more. That's significant. Overall, the class, 24 edge defenders on average. 18 last year, but 24 on average the last 3 years have been drafted overall, 7-round process. I've got 36 guys this year with draftable grades. And the combine, there are 35 edge defenders invited. Now, about 80% of the combine players wind up getting drafted. There's like 333. I don't know this year, but on average, it's like just over 330. Only 256 players get drafted. So obviously there's going to be a percentage that don't, and a handful of guys get drafted. I think it's about 10% of players that get drafted were not invited to the combine on average. My point being, it's still a good indicator of what the class looks like when you have 35 edge defenders invited to the combine. I have 36 guys, edge defenders, graded in the first 7 rounds. compared to 24 over the last 3 years. Now let's get to inside defensive linemen, the IDLs. 10 in the last 3 years on average, right? The last 3 year average, 10 interior defensive linemen have been drafted in the first 3 rounds. I've got 17 with grades in the first 3 rounds. Again, 7-player difference for both edge and interior defensive linemen in the first 3 rounds. Those are guys you expect to play significant roles, whether it's day one starter, in a rotation, develop them as a starter. When you draft a player in the first 3 rounds, you expect in that first 3 years that they become an impact player and become a starter. 17.
Yeah.
20,
my numbers there.
Yes.
Very similar.
Overall, 23 have been drafted interior defensive linemen in the last 3 years. 23 IDLs drafted the last 3 years. I've got 36, Muench, with draftable grades. 39 invited to the combine. That's ridiculous. So that's the jumping off point today. There's a lot of buzz I'm hearing. I've had conversations with interesting people, including even Albert Breer yesterday. We were on the phone for an hour. A lot of information started to come out. We're talking about dropping the mock draft very soon. Stay tuned. Check it out on X. We got at McShay 13. You got Muench's You Good Muench, Y-O-U, good, M-U-E-N-C-H. He's got his new Twitter handle. Thank you for the audience sending in suggestions. We went with one of them.
Thank God.
Yes. So we'll keep you posted, but we're very soon here, maybe this week, dropping my first mock draft in 2 years, right? So exciting week. And then next week, we've got the combine. Talking about maybe not doing a show on Monday or Tuesday because we're flying in on Wednesday. We're going to have a preview show from the combine with measurables, get everyone ready for it on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we're going to have the first day of workouts. Friday, second day of workouts. Saturday, third day of workouts, which is the big one. Quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, right? It's a huge day. Saturday, we'll post a rare weekend draft show. And then Sunday, we fly home. Monday, we do a review show. So we're going to be loaded here for the next 10, 12 days. Stick with us from mock drafts to combine previews to the combine review. We're going to cover it all. And I'm telling you, I'm getting information that's pretty freaking wild, man. Things are starting to shape up. And you start to say, well, what do people know now? The draft boards haven't been set. I get it. Meetings are happening. But you go back and talk to some general managers who have drafted quarterbacks, and sometimes they say, yeah, we knew at this point in the process. Yeah. We knew we were going with this guy. We started making phone calls about trades in February. Okay. So things are starting to happen, and I'm getting inside information that I'm excited to share. Not quite there yet. Hopefully with the mock draft coming out, we'll be able to explain it all. But let's start with you, Muench, because I always get yelled at. And even my daughter, my sweet Alaire, watched a show the other day, just a few minutes, but she said, why don't you let the other guy talk? And everyone on the comments. And we are 10 minutes and 46 seconds in, and it's probably been like 20 words from Muench and 3,000 from me. So, interior defensive lineman. Why don't you start there? Because we both took this project on. We're just ripping through tape.
Oh my God.
Player after player. We got the PFF Ultimate, which is helping us with the, you can sort it out by pass rush win rate, positive plays, rundowns, negative plays versus the run. Any way you can possibly think of breaking it up, it goes immediately. You press the button, it goes to the video. So anyone who's out there who's a junkie and really wants to get the tape, I'm telling you, PFF Ultimate is an unbelievable source, and it's that or the version similar, whether it's their own database like the Baltimore Ravens have and their own situation. That's what NFL teams are doing. They're breaking up the cut-ups. So with interior defensive linemen, let me start with this.
Okay.
This interior defensive line group is loaded, obviously. Actually, you started. I'll give you a nugget later. Go ahead. Sorry.
I got something for you right out of the gate. Last show, I say, I'm going to tell everyone right now, Oregon defensive tackle Derek Harmon isn't a top 5 defensive tackle in this class. And I usually feel really good about what I say in the show. And then we all wrap it up. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next show. Great show, all that. And I was like, wait a minute. Am I serious? Did I just put my foot in my mouth? Is Derek Harmon really not a top 5 defensive tackle in this class? And you know what? He's not. He's not a top 5 defensive tackle in this class. And it speaks
Really?
to how good this group is. No, he's just not. I'm sorry. Mason Graham is on his own level. Mason Graham is his own dude. Okay.
Michigan.
He's your tier 1 guy, tier
Yep.
1 McShay guy. Then you have, I think, Walter Nolan, and I was kind of downplaying Kenneth Grant a little bit. I was out of my mind on that one. Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan are in a race for DT2, in my opinion. Then you get into my guy, who I have absolutely fallen in love after digging in and watching tape, and that's South Carolina's TJ Sanders. He is
Really
awesome. I love his tape. I love the way he plays the run. He can one gap, he can two gap. He has instincts like a linebacker when he's playing the run. The way he tracks and locates the ball, slips blocks, sifts through traffic. I loved his tape. He is a no-brainer first rounder to me. And then I got Ohio State's Tyleik Williams to round out my top 5, which puts Harmon in really, and I'll tell you this is not so much of a knock on Derek Harmon, who had a great year. But when you watch TJ, so we're watching those clips and those cut-ups, watch TJ Sanders pass rush clips, and then to watch Derek Harmon's clips. And it's a different thing. Derek Harmon's getting home because of stunts. Guys are kind of rolling into him. TJ Sanders is winning with his hands. He's got moves. Derek Harmon's a little bit more raw in that situation. So now TJ Sanders is undersized. I get that. I'm not really worried about it after watching his tape. He's strong. He can slip blocks. TJ Sanders is going to be fine. So then I think you get Derek Harmon in that next bucket or tier, whatever way you want to say it. I'm really high on Shamar Turner.
So let's all right. I love your passion.
Yeah,
I love your energy. I love how much caffeine you've had this morning. We'll get back, and I do want to pick your brain and share some thoughts on each of these guys and their traits. But you're saying for you, if we're going off of tiers, which is the phraseology I've always used, the Ravens like to use buckets. Clusters is another phrase that we hear often, right? When you talk to people inside the NFL, whatever the phrasing is. For us, tier 1 is Mason Graham, and I don't disagree. But you're saying for you, tier 2, and correct me if I'm wrong, is Walter Nolan, interior defensive lineman from Ole Miss, 6'3", 293 pounds, 33-inch arms, and Kenneth Grant, the Michigan interior defensive lineman, teammate obviously of Mason Graham, who's a bigger cat. We don't have his, let's not even throw out measurables at this point. We only have Walter Nolan's because he was at the Senior Bowl. Kenneth Grant was not. It was not. And so we'll wait for the combine to throw out the measurables, but he's a bigger cat.
And he's widely expected to have an outrageous workout. Whenever he works out, he's supposed to put on a show.
Correct. But you're saying also, maybe I misheard, also in that tier 2?
No, that's my tier 2.
That's your tier 2. So tier 3 then starts, in your opinion.
Are my tiers too small? I feel like maybe
no. I'm a small tier guy.
Okay, good. Good.
Let's get, and then let's stack them within. So then tier 3 starts for you with TJ Sanders, the 3 technique from South Carolina, who checked in at the Senior Bowl at 6'036". That means 6'3 3/4 inches, right? 284 pounds. He's a classic 3 technique. Undersized, taller, good length, big hands, right? If I remember, 10 1/4 hands. Excuse me, 33 5/8 arms. So those are long arms for a defensive tackle, which is great.
Yeah.
So that starts your tier 3.
And then Tyleik Williams is in that tier. And then I think there's when you get to tier 4, it's a much bigger tier. I mean, you're starting to.
So Harmon isn't even in your first 3 tiers.
No. He's not in the top 5. He's not in the first 3 tiers.
What about Alfred Collins from Texas and Josh Farmer from Florida State?
All the next group with Harmon. And I'm also higher, I believe, than you on Texas A&M's Shamar Turner, who played hurt this year. But if you look at the production in the tape, if you look at the production from 2 years ago, and you still look at the tape from this year, I mean, the kid's playing on a stress fracture that he went to the Senior Bowl, and they're like, bro, you have a stress fracture that hasn't healed. You got to go heal up. And when you think about how he was playing on that injury, man, he's a dude too. I mean, there's that bucket there. And then you could also throw into that group right there, Darius Alexander from Toledo, who had an outrageous Senior Bowl.
I'm high on Darius Alexander.
Me too. So what I'm saying, and to keep this in perspective, I'm not saying that Derek Harmon's not going to be a starter in the NFL, because I do believe that he will be. It's just this when you start reading those numbers at the beginning of the show and you give that perspective, this class is loaded and it's deep, but it's also talented. Maybe not elite at the top, but that's, when you get into that day 2 range, there's going to be a bunch of guys that are drafted in day 2 from the defensive tackle group, that interior defensive line group. They're going to turn into players in the NFL.
I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
Whether it's 20, 30 seconds, give me your elevator pitch, and I'm going to go down to the list. I'm not going to go through 10 guys. I'm going to go through just a handful of guys. Give me your elevator pitch on Mason Graham, defensive tackle, Michigan, who's your only tier 1 player.
First of all, the tape speaks for itself. I'll say that right away. We can do traits, but I just have to mention this. His tape was really good this year. If you go back and you look at the players that he played and the players that either got drafted or are going to get drafted the year before when they won the national championship, and how he played against those players, he was the alpha. He was the dominant player in all of those tapes. He can win. I mean, it starts for me with feet and hands when you're talking about defensive tackles. Can they change directions a little bit? Do they have a little bit of agility? They don't have to move like a defensive end, but can they move a little bit? And then more importantly, really, is the hands. Can they win with their hands? Can they get off blocks? Mason Graham passes those tests with flying colors. And he's a guy that can play on the outside too if you really need him to. I don't think that's something I would do that much because it's not his strength, and he's just absolutely dominant on the inside. But he, at that size, is athletic and quick and agile enough to, if you'd like the matchup against maybe a guy who doesn't have much sand in the pants at offensive tackle, he'd go out there and play there too if you wanted him to. He is just, the tape, it speaks for itself. He's unblockable at times.
When you're watching Michigan defensive line tape, for you personally, and you're watching Mason Graham, and he's obviously in a tier of his own, but Kenneth Grant not far behind in terms of tiers in that second tier. What's the biggest difference you see between Graham and Kenneth Grant?
Consistency, especially at getting off blocks. I think that Grant's not as good at getting off blocks. He's just not as consistent. The flip side with Grant is, and I kind of hinted at it, is the ceiling is outrageous. I mean, the ceiling is outrageous. You see him when he gets a chance. You don't see a lot with defensive tackles, but when he gets a chance to chase, this is a guy that moves differently than most human beings with that kind of size. So to me, you're talking about Graham consistently great, Grant flashes of greatness, good player.
Walter Nolan, what stands out to you?
You better block him with 2, and if you can't, and even sometimes when you block him with 2, he's still going to beat you. I think he's quick enough to split double teams. Another guy that if you really wanted to kick him outside in certain matchups, you could do it. But he can win with his hands. He can win with his quickness. There's going to be some similar traits here because, again, when I'm looking for in an elite defensive tackle, these guys are going to share some of those tools. But the one thing that jumped out at me with Nolan when I watched his tape was you better block him with 2, and even when you do, he can win.
Yeah, I thought I see flashes as a pass rusher. I really do. I think he's really, really strong versus the run. Like,
you're worried about the pass rush?
I see flashes. I see flashes, but I look at some of his best games as a pass rusher, like Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern.
Thought he was really good at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was really good at
one-on-ones. I like him. I'm just saying, when I watched him on tape, when I see Walter Nolan on tape, I see a guy who's great versus the run because he's stuff. He's stout. He can stuff the run. He gets off of blocks. He's disruptive. He's just like power, strength, like built thick, but also has some quickness and is active and disrupts. As a pass rusher, I see a guy who has those traits, but he's going to need developing in order to, against like top tier offensive linemen, figure out how to, counter, how to get home, how to be more consistent as a pass rusher.
I'm not as concerned, but I get it.
I'm it's not a massive concern. I'm saying, as I'm trying to within the tiers, I'm just, that's if there's a concern for me, why isn't he in that tier 1? Because he's a big, good-looking dude, carries his weight, has all the athletic traits. Again, comparatively speaking, if we're talking about top tier, top 10 type picks, I think, excuse me, his consistency as a pass rusher and his like refinement, ability to come up with counters against good offensive linemen that know what they're doing. They come in with balance and with a plan. That's where he's going to have to be a masterclass, and he has the skills to do it.
How do you approach when a player, and he's a great example, Ole Miss's defensive line is loaded, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you approach it? And I know you're talking about traits.
Ivy.
Yep. I want to get into these too, by the way. So when you have an offensive line like that, or Texas A&M offensive line, where maybe you don't get home because there's 3 other dudes you play with who can get home, does that impact how you're looking at it? I mean, you could look at Middle Tennessee State and be like, he had most of his pressures. You know what I mean? But like, there's other games where they're playing in where maybe he would in a different situation, he's going to get home, but there goes UMan flying off the edge, or Ivy's winning with power.
I'm not worried about the sacks, and I'm worried about, I'm studying the tape. Like there are times when Jalen Walker steals a sack from Michael Williams or vice versa.
Right. Or chases him into him. Yeah, I got you.
All that stuff. It's basically, that's why I put more focus on like the pass rush win rate, if we're going to put any focus on any numbers, than I do on the sacks, And when I'm watching tape, it's more about like, are you winning that one-on-one? I can't concern myself with what the other 10 are doing in that situation, but I got to keep perspective on what's happening on the tape.
Right. So is Nolan a tier? Is he a tier below for you, or is he?
No, he's not.
Okay.
I'm just countering to you and saying, why isn't he in tier 1? I think that if you polled a lot of different scouts who have been evaluating him for 2 years now, if you polled them all, like, why isn't he going to be a top 10 pick? Pretty confident that would be the answer.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Because there's a reason he's not a top 10 pick, but there's also a lot of reasons why he's going to be a first round pick, right?
Right. Yeah. Keep it in perspective. Mason Graham, by the way, can I just make this comparison real quick? Is almost the prospect that Joe Alt was last year. And that it's just so safe and clean. And when you watch his tape, it's play after play after play after play of him doing the right thing, him making plays, him dominating his opponent. Like, I remember Joe Alt's evaluation, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame, by the way, came out last year. I got to be better about this. The offensive tackle out of Notre Dame that the Chargers drafted last year. His evaluation was so easy because his tape was so clean. And I feel the same way about Mason Graham. You're going to have a tough time coming up with a low light package for Mason Graham.
Yeah, and Alt was the second position player drafted in the class with 3 quarterbacks and one of 2 like unbelievably elite wide receivers. And Marvin Harrison Jr. went 4, I believe, to Arizona, and then he was 5 to the Chargers, if memory serves me. All right, a couple more things. We talked about pass rush win rate, right? I looked this up just to kind of get some perspective, and this will lead me to a couple things. 3 defensive linemen, interestingly enough, were kind of head and shoulders above the rest. Is that what a catchphrase? Omar Norman-Lott from Tennessee, 19.4. He was kind of up there with some of the top edge guys, okay? Like in the top 30 edge guys, which obviously speaks to what I'll get into Norman-Lott in a minute. Aeneas Peebles, from Virginia Tech, number 2, not surprising. I think he's underrated in this class. 3 technique, active, disruptive, get him in that, inside shoulder of the tackle. Let him hit that 3 gap, or there's a 3 technique and the B gap, and let him get upfield and see what he can do when he gets there. And then your boy, Derek Harmon from Oregon, number 3. And then there's a big drop off. It was 19.4 for Norman-Lott, 18.6 for Peebles, and 17.9 for Harmon. And then you get down just by comparison purposes. when you get down to like the Mason Grahams and the Walter Nolans, they were like in that 11-10%, which is still like, I'm not complaining about those numbers. It's a pretty good pass rush win rate for an interior defensive lineman, but it speaks to like how successful those guys were as pass rushers. Okay.
Yeah.
Norman Lott, Tennessee, Peebles from Virginia Tech, and Harmon from Oregon.
That's funny,
Year,
go ahead. I didn't see it with Harmon as much on tape. I didn't see it, but I'll go back now. I'll go back and take another look. I didn't see Harmon as a great pass rusher.
Okay. Well, please do.
Yeah.
Good thing we've 65 days left until the NFL draft.
We'll get it right. I'll get it right.
I take a lot of pride in this, Muench, and I'm just going to sit here and get Tommy John surgery and pat myself on the back. But every year I feel like there's like one undervalued interior defensive lineman that I'm on.
Okay. Who's your guy?
Last year was Brandon Fisk, and it was early. It was before but he still wound up going in the second round. He was DT7.
Dude, he was a nightmare at the end of the season. He was unbelievable in that ACC championship game.
But no one wanted to get on board.
Really?
He was the 7th interior defensive lineman drafted last year, bud.
Where'd he go? He went in the top 50, though.
Yeah, he was in the second round.
Yeah.
But I was banging on the table for this guy as a first rounder. Had him at like 26 overall.
Okay.
Had him as like the third interior defensive lineman, something like that. Keanu Benton, year before, he was interior defensive lineman number 5 taken, second round by the Steelers. Justin Madubuike, 3rd round by the Ravens. Go all the way back to 2015, sitting in hotel rooms, bitching to scouts coming in and out. Why not Grady Jarrett? Because he's short.
Right.
This guy's an absolute terror. He was a 5th round pick by the Falcons.
That's crazy to me.
Right?
That was unbelievable that he fell that far.
Now that I'm done patting myself on the back and getting Tommy John surgery, I'm just saying there's always one guy. Yes, I will calm down. And I get it. I'm doing it so that you can make fun of me. But I'm saying there's always one guy that jumps out to me. And I've already said his name today, and I have said it multiple times. Omar Norman Lott. There's something about this guy, man. He's stout. He's shorter than everyone else, so he doesn't look like he's not as physically intimidating. You put him next to Walter Nolan. You put him next to even like Tim Smith at the Senior Bowl, who's this hulking dude, right? Omar Norman Lott checked in at the Senior Bowl at 6'017", so under 6'2", 295 pounds, but he had 33 5/8 inch arm length. Okay, which is above average. Listen to this, 11 1/8 inch hand span. And I promise you, for defensive linemen that can actually legally use their hands and control blocks and the strength that they need and to shove, move, slide, whatever, to lock out versus offensive tackles or offensive guards as an interior defensive lineman, as you're trying to locate the football in the backfield and then to, disengage. Mm-hmm. It's important. And then you look at his pass rush win rate, the best of the group, 19.4. Bud, that's up there with the top guys as edge rushers. Like Mike Green was 22%. He's at 19.4. Okay.
All right. I love that build for a defensive tackle, by the way.
Yes.
It's a naturally low center of gravity. And 295 at that build, that's a good weight at that size. And then you add the juice. He explodes off the ball. So you got a guy, good luck trying to get underneath Norman Lott as an offensive lineman. Good luck getting underneath him. And then he has enough length. Again, he's long for that height. So he has enough length to get into your frame. He really uses his hands well. He's a good player. One thing I'll ask you, doesn't play a lot of snaps this year.
No one on Tennessee did. They rotated like 14 guys.
We'll get into
if you're gonna bang the drum on James Pierce Jr. No, if you're gonna bang the drum on James Pierce Jr., while everyone else is criticizing, say, well, the tape wasn't there this year. Well, he's always rested, and of course he is fresh. Like that's a lot of the complaints, right?
Whose voice is that? Is that my voice?
No, it's all the other people that are making the complaints. But now I'm hearing you throw that at me with Omar Norman Lott. It's the same shit.
Are you? Well, I'll say it's a little bit different. I think that James Pierce, I like Norman Lott's build, and I like the way his tape is awesome and all those things. James Pierce is a unique athlete. His tools are elite, I think. I'm not sure that you could say that about Norman Lott, but that being said, I'm nitpicking. I'm getting into an argument I don't want to get into just because that's how I am with you. I love Norman Lott's tape, but people might look at that and saying he was fresh all the time.
Great. I'm going to remind you that in like 6 minutes when we get to James Pierce Jr. I don't disagree with you on Mason Graham. Just to kind of put a I don't want to say a bow on it, but just to add a little not context. I think at this point, just to give my opinion on the tiers and where you are, I agree with you on Mason Graham. He's in a league of his own. I think Kenneth Grant, his teammate, Walter Nolan, and Derek Harmon, unlike you, are in that second tier for me. All like late first. Okay. Then there's a third tier for me. And this is the kind of the thickest tier, if you will. And you can break them up into two, but let's just call it one tier for now. Okay. Because I do think it's probably two tiers, but I'm going to throw out a bunch of names in there that I think when you're sorting through these are the names that you have to keep in consideration. I think Alfred Collins is in there from Texas. I think Omar Norman Lott is in there from Tennessee. I think Darius Alexander is in there from Toledo to go along with guys like Josh Farmer from Florida State, Tyleik Williams, who I'm surprised you're still really high on Tyleik Williams, who's another 3 technique, along with TJ Sanders, who you love from South Carolina. Those guys are classic 3 techniques. Tyleik Williams, TJ Sanders, Darius Alexander. Okay. I also would include Shamar Turner, but probably a little lower in that bucket or tier. Jordan Phillips would be low in that bucket or tier. Aeneas Peebles from Virginia Tech, also in that tier. Maybe you break it into a second tier there. But that's a bunch of guys. Collins, Farmer, Tyleik Williams, TJ Sanders, Darius Alexander, Omar Norman Lott, Shamar Turner, Jordan Phillips, Peebles. That's 9 guys. So yeah, we're going to break that into 2. But my point is, that's all in that second, early, mid, third round range. Okay.
What do you got with JJ Pegues? Do you have him in there and all?
Pegues?
Yeah.
I like Pegues. I like his natural athleticism. I like his movement skills. I think he's still developing as a player. I think it's cute that he carries the ball on 4th down. It's fun. You know, the crowd loves that. Thick 6 and big guy.
He plays on the outside almost as much as he does on the inside. He's athletic, man. At 320 whatever pounds, he is athletic.
I think I would put him in the next tier after those guys, whether it's tier 4 or 5, but still very much in the running for a day 3 pick. But in that tier, I would also include Deion Walker. He's a monster of a man, 6'7".
Yeah. Some people thought he was the first coming into the year.
6'7", 340, 34.5-inch arms, 10 3/4 inch hands. Plays like a 3 technique though. Body of like a Casey Hampton, old school nose tackle, right? Massive guy.
Right.
But pads too high, gets moved too easily by leverage, right?
Yep.
But shouldn't be able to move that way at his size. So like I'm a D-line coach and I get involved now at this point in the process. I want to know, is he coachable? What's his work ethic like? What are his eating habits? Those are the things I need to know, because if this guy is, and he's willing to work with me and he's going to put in the grind, my gosh, there's a lot of clay here to mold, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why he's intriguing as a late day 2 prospect. Ty Robinson's another one I want to dig in a little deeper on.
Ty Robinson
from Nebraska, right?
Yeah, he's a good player, man.
And Ty Hamilton from Ohio State.
Yeah.
Probably early 4th, but like could be a top top 100 pick.
I mean, just talent everywhere.
Yes.
Everywhere.
All right. That's the interior defensive lineman. And I want to remind everyone when they come to me and say, this class sucks, right?
Such a bitter old man.
This class isn't very good. Can't wait. What's 2026 looking like? Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Like, look at what the Eagles do. Look at what the Bills have done. Look at what the Ravens do, right? Look at what the franchises that win year over year over year. Look at what the Packers have done historically.
Yeah.
Defensive linemen, like this year is a gold mine, an absolute gold mine for this defensive line class. You got to take advantage. If you got 3 picks, use 2 of them on defensive front in the first 3 rounds. If you got 4, you got a compensatory or a traded pick, then use at least 2, maybe 3. Get your running back in the 3rd or 4th, 5th. Get your wide receiver late. Like, get to take advantage of this class. And that brings me to the edge guys. We talked about the perspective already. Edge defenders, 13 on average the last 3 years in the first 3 rounds. We've got 20 with grades that belong there this year. 24 drafted in the last 3 years on average, 36 with grades, draftable grades. 35 invited to the combine. Edge is just as loaded. I don't know. You can make an argument. We'll argue that another day. We don't have time for it today. Which one's deeper and stronger, interior or edge? I did a lot of work on this the last couple days. We have all season, but I really wanted to break up this edge class, and I want to circle back after I'm done with this. But I wanted to give you 2 tiers, Muench, so that people who are just getting into this draft and are like, all right, McShay, you've sat here and you've been a blowhard. You haven't shut up about how deep and strong this group is. Well, tell me about them. What makes them so good? Well, here's what it is. Just like a defensive tackle or interior defensive lineman, there's a tier 1 guy. There's not many. There's only like 4 tier 1 guys in this entire class. Truly.
Right.
Truly. Maybe 3. Abdul Carter's a tier 1 edge.
Yeah.
He would go along with Travis Hunter and Mason Graham. I think that maybe, yeah.
And Warren. I would say there's more. Tyler Warren, too, at the tight end.
I'm going to put him at tier 2 because I'm tough with that elite tier, man. Here's the difference between you and I. I've had to go back for 20 years and explain grades. Because at ESPN, there would be a graphic up there. And they would line it up over 10 years, past decade, Scouts Inc. draft grades, McShay, blah, blah, blah. And so, like, when I'm putting someone in that tier 1, like, I got to live with that shit for a decade or more. And so I want
to make this clear. I know you love Warren. I know you love him.
Absolutely obsessed with him.
He is 1,000% a tier 1 tight end. He is without question a tier 1 tight end.
He's a tier 1 tight end, no question. But is he tier 1, like the elite of the elite class, like up there, like the elite grade? I'm talking the elite grades that you're going to give over history. That's where I'm not saying he's not definitively. I'm saying it's definitely like I'm in an argument with myself about Ginty, about Warren. Are they really just like truly top tier 2? Okay. We'll have that discussion. Today's not the
we're going to get into that.
Mensch. It's not
we'll
the
get into that.
Day. Or the running back day. We did the running back day 4 days ago. My point being, there's 2 tiers that I believe all these guys belong in the first round, in my opinion.
Okay.
And let me just preface this by, I've had a lot of calls with scouts in the last 10 days, and we had a lot of conversations at the Senior Bowl as well. You and I on the field, in the stands, talking to guys, friends for decades, or guys we've just met, or we've had a lot of conversations. Not everyone agrees with this, especially with a couple guys. But this is where I am, okay? Abdul Carter's tier 1 by himself in the edge class. Tier 2 is the fascinating part. We talked about with Eric DeCosta, GM of the Ravens, like, get him in the bucket, right? But when they're in the bucket, that's when he uses a lot of that analytics and the data, and everyone remembers the headline from him saying that they use Madden rating, but what people didn't probably take away because they only listened to the headline is it's part of like 140 different data points that go into this, as he calls it, a cocktail. All right.
Right.
And so that helps you sort within the bucket, as he calls it, or the tier for us. Here's my tier 2. I'm going to list it off and I'm going to give you a little nugget. I'm going to go back and give you a little nugget. Michael Williams, Georgia. Jalon Walker, Georgia. James Pierce Jr., Tennessee. Mike Green, Marshall. Shamar Stewart, Texas A&M. Not like 92s and 91 grades. No, like not a big difference in grades. Tough to sort out. I think at this point, that's where I am in terms of the rankings within that tier.
Don't hate it.
All right. Michael, let me just give you my, like, even less than I've got 2 floors on an elevator with the CEO to give you a little pitch. and then I'll come back into your office later and explain. Michael Williams, bet on his traits. And part of his traits is his age. Okay. He's a pup.
Mm-hmm.
God doesn't make many human beings that look and are athletically gifted like him. The reason he's there is I'm betting on his traits. Jalon, he's got to be scheme fit and you got to have a plan. But the explosive traits are beyond exciting. James Pierce Jr., most complete and advanced pass rusher with talent and traits involved, but most complete and advanced, like he's ready of this tier. Mike Green, second best pure pass rusher of this group and maybe most complete player of this group. But his traits aren't as high, in my opinion. Still very high, but his traits are not at the level of Michael, Jalon, and Pierce. And then Shamar Stewart is different in that he is power-based, production not yet there. But if you get him with a veteran group and a coach to untap, he's got a chance to be outstanding. That's my breakdown. Michael, let's just get into it. Michael Williams. Abdul Carter, I think, kind of speaks for itself. Even the casual fan knows, like, he is dynamic. He's explosive. He's compared to Micah Parsons. I hate to put that bar on him. He's not there. He's not at the level that Micah Parsons was coming out necessarily, but just a slight notch below. He's like a former off the ball linebacker playing edge. Best fit is at edge in the NFL, but could do both and play and provide that hybrid, multiple facet to your defense if you need it. Unbelievably explosive. If you're looking for a feel good and trying to understand the will and the competitiveness of this young man, go watch the college football playoff. Final game of his collegiate career, played literally with one arm, one functional arm, and was dominant in that game against Notre Dame. But Michael, the top of tier 2 for me. He's tough to evaluate, man, because the thing that works against him is that Jalon Walker is opposite him, and sometimes they're on the same side. And Jalon is so fast and so sudden and so explosive. And Michael is just built different. You're talking 6'5", right. 265, okay? Tall, body beautiful, long arms. He also on tape, you got to keep this in perspective. I want to remind everyone. He injured his ankle in the first game of the season against Clemson. So now you're watching a 6'5", 265-pounder on the same defensive front with Jalon Walker, who's what? I don't have the number.
6'2", 245.
6'2", 245. So 3 inches shorter, 20 pounds lighter. And older, and is more, more experienced. Michael's going to be 20 years old when he's drafted, bud.
It's crazy.
His birthday's June 29th, 2004. We're getting old. But he dealt with a so you've got this young pup who's 20 years old, who's probably 19. He's 20 years old during this past season, dealing with a lingering ankle injury.
Right.
Who's taller and bigger significantly, 20 pounds and 3 inches. He just doesn't look as explosive and dynamic when you're comparing it to him. But versus the run, I think I don't want to call him outstanding or elite, but he's going to be a damn good run defensive end in the NFL. So it's just check that box. Strong at the point of attack, tough to move, locks out, locates, disengages with relative ease, tackles with authority, solid range. He's a 4-3 defensive end, can plug him at left or right. He's very good run defender, and that stuff travels to the NFL. Okay?
Right.
And he's only going to get better as he gets more mature, older, stronger, better technique. Pass rusher. Again, it's the traits. He's not there yet, but you can't coach the long arms. He's got unbelievably quick hands. Swipes and rip he's when he uses them correctly, he's got unbelievably quick hands. Shows enough power to convert speed to power as a pass rusher. Athletically gifted, smooth mover. Great forward lean when he fires out as a pure pass rusher. When he knows he's at third downs, obvious pass downs, great foot. He's not to the Bosa level. No two edges that I ever watched with their length.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. JPP was a little bit like that. Certain guys, it's almost like they're skidding on the water. Their fire out so low. He's got a little bit of that, not quite to the level. But he also, the thing I love about him, there's this natural ability that all great pass rushers have. This natural ability, it's like an instinct. Again, God gave this to you. He was born to be a pass rusher. Natural ability to keep his hands and legs moving to advance his rush while engaged. All the great ones, okay?
Yeah.
Now, still developing his plan as a pass rusher. Counter moves aren't there. Inconsistent with gap integrity. I know you've seen that a lot on tape. Not horrible, but there are times where you're like, Kirby's not going to like that. You know?
It's going to be a long film session.
And while his hands are super quick and there's a lot to work with there, he doesn't always land his punches. Okay. So that's where I am. How about this for a comp? How about this
first
for an NFL
Texas
comp?
tape is all I need for him. Go back and watch the first Texas tape, and
him and Jalon Walker.
Yeah. But let's talk about Michael for a minute. Michael in that first Texas game was, I thought, dominant.
Absolutely. How about this for a comp? It's not a current one, but it Zeke Ansah.
Huh. That's interesting. I don't hate that.
Do you remember the story with Zeke Ansah? And I'm not comparing. I'm just saying, when he came over to BYU, I remember getting a call from my really good friend, Rod Gilmore. He's like, check this guy out. I just talked to the coaching staff. He got here. He was doing something like intramural sports or some other, maybe basketball, whatever it was. They asked him to come out, and he's like, sure, I'll try that. I'll try football. Right. They had to teach him how to tie up his shoulder pad, put his helmet on. He didn't know anything. Okay. And 2 years later, they developed him into a player that was worth drafting, but still had a lot of work to do. I'm not saying Michael is that raw, but I'm saying as a 20-year-old, when he's drafted, you're getting a very raw version of what you expect to get in a year or two.
Gotcha.
Big, long, power-based, but quick and athletic and sudden in his own regard. I liked it, but you can bleep off.
I think he's farther along than that, but yeah, you said
he is farther along, no question.
That's a problem with comps, man. That's where they get tricky, right? Everyone's like, well, he's not exactly like that guy. Well, yeah, it's a comp.
How many comps did you give me for interior defensive lineman?
I've been really good about the comps, not today. No comps today.
Okay. Want to get to Jalon Walker?
Let's do Jalon Walker.
All right, here's what I saw on tape. And I feel like everyone's going to give him this similar comp. You go the Micah Parsons route, or any off the ball linebacker who moved it. His tape is interesting because it's legit rotating from one position to the next.
Right.
He's pass rushing the A gap, the B gap, the C gap, the D gap from off the ball and from the edge. And I said this to Albert Breer when we were talking yesterday. When you got a guy like Micah, when you got a guy like Abdul, when you got a guy like Jalon, they're like, for the rest of those types, it's like, what is he? Yeah, he's a hybrid, but it works as a negative. Like, what's his fit? What's his fit?
Is he a tweener or is he a hybrid?
Correct. He's a hybrid.
Right.
And as defensive coordinator, my mind immediately goes to, shit, I can use this guy in like 5 different spots. And it doesn't matter if it's 1st and 10 or 3rd and 18 or 3rd and 3. Like, there's a place on the field for him. And in a game now where we're seeing, substitution packages, tempo at times, like all the different facets of the modern NFL game, having those guys that provide multiplicity for a defensive coordinator. Like, when you talk to defensive coordinators, whether college or NFL, it's like a drinking game. He makes us multiple. Everything's multiple. We need to be multiple here. We got to be multiple. That's why they love Brian Branches of the world and Sanders Strills. And you know what I mean? Give me guys that allow us to be multiple. Jalon gives you that. I actually think, interestingly enough, he's played more ball off the ball linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think he's a better edge.
Interesting.
I think his tape, I just think he's better when he's turned. Like, when I watch him off the ball and taking on blocks and all that stuff, like, he's good. He's a really, really good player. But I'm more excited about him as an edge rusher than I was as an off the ball linebacker. And there's a lot of both tapes. Like, I promise you, when you're watching the tape, it's like, where is he? You got to find him. It's not like it's either the right edge or left edge. He's literally all over the place in that front 7. Explosive burst off the edge. I wrote this in my notes. Sudden rusher. Everything is sudden, from his feet to his hands. I love the suddenness with his dip and rip move that he gets around. Excellent stop-start quickness. Guys that redirect, get in the backfield. Quarterbacks are moving more and more than ever before. So when you get back there, that's like the first piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Now what do you do? Because now you got a guy who runs a 4.5. Who sees you coming or feels you coming,
right?
And does the quick spin move or what, he's able to, right?
I love that. I hope people see that, because you're not going to hear that, but that was great.
But it's better than me being like, stop and reap.
No, it's perfect.
Change drag. Like, that's exactly. It's like you see it on tape. It's like, right?
Yeah,
that's what he does. He's got snap in his hands. Elite closing burst. Mm-hmm. I can't stand when people say heat-seeking missile. But
he's a heat-seeking missile.
Yes. He instinctively, he works half a man, doesn't show his pads a lot, has flexibility and strength to advance the rushes he's going through contact. Yeah, there's a lot to like. Now, versus the run, the vast majority of his positively graded run plays at edge are when he's in space and on the move. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I noticed. He's not a guy who's going to set a hard edge and do that for you. So to me, he's a 3-4 edge and more of an undersized scheme. Like, you think back the Ravens, Steelers, guys that okay with his shorter versions, right? But I like his tape. I like his tape a lot.
But are you worried about the frame?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean,
he gets thrown. So here's what I wrote: gets knocked off course too easily at times, swallowed up on occasion. He's going to have to be an absolute surgeon with his hands in order to continue this production at the next level. And it wasn't. He was damn good all year, phenomenal against Texas twice, but especially that first game. But there are moments where you're like. And that's why he's not in that first tier with Abdul.
So I went through and I looked at the top 10 leaders for sacks in the NFL last year in the regular season. Okay. There's actually 11 players because there's a tie for 10th, right?
I love when you do this shit. I love it.
All the players, there was 4 of them.
Go ahead.
4 of them and there's probably a better way to gauge who the best pass rushers are. Just a quick exercise. We can get into this deeper if we want to later on. Just quick exercise. 4 of them were sub 250 pounds. Okay. So that was actually a higher number. So there's 11 players.
We've done
of
this
them
in the
are-
past when it's been like 2.
Right. So, and one of them is Nick Benito, who was 240 pounds.
Yeah, I saw that.
Who's a young cat. Another one's Will Anderson, who's 243. So some of these younger players are coming into the league. But what's
I think
most
he's
interesting
like
to me,
260 now, but go ahead.
you're probably right. Right. But anyways, what's more interesting to me is the height. Only one of them is under 6'3", and that's Micah at 6'2". So what was I saw that and I was like, wow, this height thing, there might
He's
be
a
a little bit of a
unicorn, man.
correlation here. I get it. But there are 3 guys that we're going to talk about like this. Josiah Stewart from Michigan and Donovan Ezeruku from Boston College, who we all like. And they're all explosive and they win and they get to the quarterback and all those things. But historically, are these guys really those early round picks? And is it maybe just one of them? Or is there a trend in the league? Is there now a trend in the league that these lighter, shorter edge rushers, whether it's coordinators finding a way, whether more athletic, whatever it is, maybe there's a trend going that way. But it is interesting where we stand right now in this draft and looking at it historically. These guys, like, I mean, Trey Hendrickson is the best pass rusher in the league, probably. He's 6'4", 270. Myles Garrett, 6'4", 272. These guys are big. So
Watt, big
TJ Watt's
cat.
Yeah, 6'4", 255. I mean, he's a bigger dude.
He's got to be at least
right. These guys. That's the other thing. Will they come in and add weight? If you're 6'1", I don't know. We'll see what Jalen Walker is. I will say this, and I'm just going to mention him because you haven't mentioned him as in your top tier. Maybe you're going to get to him later. I am absolutely in love with Donovan Ezeruku from Boston College.
All right, we'll get to it in a minute.
Okay. All right, we'll get back to it.
Shocking. You love a BC kid. All right. But I honestly, I think this is a perfect transition because I wanted it was beautiful the way you just dropped that in. And it's why after really studying more tape, and I always say this, I'm air traffic control in my mind. Let's get all the planes taken off in last May. Now let's start getting them in the right direction when we get into the season. You get to the Senior Bowl. Now we're getting a flight plan. Like we've established when our landing time is. Okay. But now when we're in this part of the process, as we start we're on the doorstep of the combine next week. And after the combine, then with all the new information we have, then it's like, all right, we got to stack them and land these planes in order, 90 seconds apart. We're a major airport. Let's go. And that's why as we get closer to the draft, the gap between Mykel Williams, Jalen Walker, and James Pierce gets closer and closer and closer. Because I've got one cat who's massive, who's only 20 years old, Mykel, who's got all the traits to be elite, but we haven't seen it yet. Is it because he's only 20? Is it because he had an ankle injury, he was slowed up? But I haven't seen it yet. But if they all pan out and they're the best version of themselves and they're developed properly, which you can't bank on all those things, but if they are, Mykel should be the best of this second tier.
Okay.
Jalon is even though he's played off the ball linebacker, like I know what I'm getting with him. It's just, is that going to be enough to be a double-digit sack guy every year in the league? Can he overcome that size that you're talking about? And that's why as we get closer, if I'm starting to make this decision, James Pierce to me from Tennessee is starting to get it gets tighter and tighter because I'm looking at James Pierce and I'm saying, well, shit, of these 3 guys, he's got 6'4.5", 245, 250 pounds. He's estimated to run like 4.5. Okay. He's got pretty long arms on tape from what I can see. Okay. Carries his weight beautifully. Got room to bulk up if he, properly, if he does it. 6th best pass rush win rate of all the edges this year and did it in the SEC. 22.4%. I want to give you some perspective on this while we're here. So many damn notes. I'm going to probably mess this up. Give you a little perspective if I can find it. Oh, and we actually built a graphic for it. I was prepared for once. Tucker, if you get that graphic, let's put it. The pass rush win rate leaders. These are the guys from the combine. If you're watching on YouTube, watching on Spotify, you're able to see this. This is a list of the pass rush win rate leaders from the combine invites, okay? Josiah Stewart's up there, 27.4, which is outrageous at Michigan. Hugh Robinson, we'll talk about him. I don't know if we'll even get to him today, but he is an intriguing mid-round prospect that I've watched enough tape to say that I think I like him more than some other people. Abdul Carter, as expected, 23%. Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss, 22.9%. Elijah Roberts, very interesting, 290-pound edge, 290 Muench. Squares up, 3-4 point stance in that scheme, playing a lot of interior defensive line. He's not your classic edge. He's 290. And he's still at 22.5. Then James Pierce. I only see Abdul Carter there. I don't see Jalon Walker. I don't see Michael. Okay? Also, feeding into, just a quick side note, feeding into that is the fact that there were only 2 draft prospects last year with grades of 21% or higher. Liatu Latu and Jared Verse. We saw the rookie years that they had, right? The next highest in that group was 20.9%. Chop Robinson. Good year as well.
Yeah.
Those were all great grades, is my point. All great grades. But the only 2 last year were of higher than 21% were Latu and Verse. This year, you've got 10 guys, Muench. 10 compared to 2. So when we talk about how great this class is, 10 guys. Josiah Stewart, Hugh Robinson, Abdul Carter, Umanmielen from Ole Miss, Elijah Roberts, James Pierce Jr., Braden Swinson from LSU at 22%, Mike Green at 22%, David Walker, Central Arkansas, small school guy, really impressive tape. Ashton Galat from Louisville, all 10 of those guys, all 10 with higher grades than 21% versus just 2 a year ago. So James Pierce, he's growing on me, man. I know you love him. First step explosiveness, outstanding. Fast, long, like explosive athletic traits. Every move is sudden. I love this, right? He keeps offensive tackles in constant panic for what's next. Have you noticed that on tape?
Yeah.
That's what the great passer, like I've had the luxury and been like fortunate to spend a lot of time over my 25 years with former NFL players, all positions, and not like bad ones. If they're working in television, especially offensive linemen, they were damn good at their craft to a T. And you know, we did this with Brewski, and I do this to every former player. Like, what scares you the most? Always asking, tell me more. Offensive linemen, like, you can be a 4.3 off the edge. I don't give a shit. You can be 290 and be an absolute bulldozer. I don't really care. But if you can do both, now I'm in a panic. Right. And with James Pierce, it's like, because he's so sudden and he's got those long arms, he can get up and he can jack you back a little bit. I don't see like great core power from him in terms of like standing a guy up and driving him, but I do see that like whack, like sudden, where he's going to jack you up just enough, and then the quickness and suddenness are going to take over, right? The striking pop is what I wrote over and over again. He's like that pop. Advances through contact, which we always look for. Much more power in terms of that first strike and in his hands than his frame would indicate. Moves the quarterback. If you go back and just look, no matter how it is, whether he's on a stunt, a twist, rushing off the edge, outside in move, inside out move, all of it. He is a total headache to deal with in the passing game. Count how many times this guy, even if it's not technically a pressure or a hurry or whatever the bleep your like numbers are, if it's not a sack, count how many times he makes that quarterback think about him. And as a former terrible quarterback at a low level, and like, there's nothing worse than having to take your train of thought off of what you're processing and knowing that this guy is consistently doing, and it takes a toll over the course of a game.
Look at Mahomes in the Super Bowl. I mean, that's exactly what's happening.
Now, he's a bit high cut. quarter count, slower than ideal, redirecting in the backfield. That's the thing. If I've got one bitch about James Pierce Jr. as a prospect, it's that everything else is like he's long, body beautiful, fast, explosive, sudden, pop in his hands, all of that. He leaves a lot of sacks and plays, not a lot. He leaves more than you'd like to see on tape. He leaves them on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think he's got some tightness in him when he gets back there. We talked about Jalon Walker. It's right.
Yep.
He's not quite. Chris Spielman always used to say that. It's like watching the Titanic try to change course. Like,
yep.
He's not that. Don't get me wrong here. But he takes a quarter count longer and will kind of lose his balance sometimes when he gets in the backfield. Yeah. And I think more of a consistent plan with him, but you can say that about just about all these guys. In support, active, excellent range, gets off of blocks, very good in pursuit, can get into pads and move. You can get into his pads and move him a little bit in the run game, but for the most part, stays active and disruptive. I think he's a perfect fit, like a wide 9, Tampa 2 right defensive end, 3-4 edge. We know what he does best. Here's my comp. Adafe Owe.
Out of Penn State.
Out of Penn State, Baltimore Ravens. I see some similarities. I'm not saying it's perfect, but some similarities there.
I don't hate that one. That's good.
So that's where I am. And I don't want to sit here and Shamar Stewart, we've talked a lot about power-based, loved his Missouri tape, talked to a scout the other day. He's like, yeah, well, what about the 6 other tapes I watched? I feel like I'm fighting more people in the league on Shamar Stewart. And I explained it the other day. So I don't want to be repetitive here, but there are some people in the league that worry when the production doesn't match up. There's a couple guys you can look in history and say, yeah, it didn't match up for Chandler Jones or for this guy. But at the end of the day, if there's 2 guys that it did work out and they became great pros, there's 20 guys that didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to give. I think Daniil Hunter might have been another one. But I still like Stewart. I think in the right environment, Shamar Stewart's got a chance to be really good. And Mike Green, we talked about him a lot at the combine, just dominant. But that's my tier 2.
No Ezeruku.
Tier 3.
I'm dying to talk about him, man.
I'm going to let you go here. At the top of tier 3 are 2 of your guys, so I'm going to let you take it. I've talked too much per usual. But here's this tier 3 where I think we get into early second round. And I'm going to list off the tier 3 and know that there's a tier 4 behind it with a lot of really big names and a lot of good players that I all think belong in that 3rd round range, okay? That's tier 4. But tier 3, to me, is your boy Ezeruku, Nick Scorton, both of your boys, Braden Swinson, who's quickly becoming one of my guys, JTT from Ohio State, Oluwafemi Oladejo, who I love from UCLA. I just love his story. He's another guy who played off the ball, move up, found his home at edge this past year. Unbelievable production, unbelievable just dog traits. I think he's going to be a really good pro. And Josiah Stewart, who was at the top of that list, if you remember, 27.4 is that's more than a quarter of the time that he's going to wind up winning his pass rush, which is
pretty good.
Just stupid. So let's have a debate on Ezeraku. Donovan Ezeraku. It's Ezeraku. I looked it up yesterday. 6'2", 248, long arms, 34.5. Here's what I wrote. Efficient with hands and feet, not a lot of wasted movement. Not as explosive or fast as James Pierce, but I would say better body control. We talked about that.
I would totally agree with that.
Great body control. He doesn't have that a lot of wasted. When he has to redirect, everything's under control. He gets into offensive tackles' pads. He locates the ball. His special trait is then to disengage in a flash. That's his special trait. He is so good with his hands and his ability to disengage. Rushes with good body lean, good job keeping offensive tackles off balance. He does a really good job. If you watch him on tape, you get used to it. Outside in or inside out move. Excellent dip with that body control around the edge. Like, everything's body control. I keep going back to that. But he's short, man. He got moved off course too easily by bigger, more competent offensive tackles. That's what I noticed as I was going through his tape, going through his pass rush tape. Bigger, more competent offensive tackles really pushed him off course easier than you'd want to see from a guy you're talking about as a top 50 pick sometimes. Will need to become an absolute masterclass, is what I wrote, with his pass rush plan and continue with his hands in order to develop into a double-digit sack guy in the NFL. But he led the nation this past year with 1.38 sacks per game, and second nationally with 16 and a half sacks, only behind Mike Green, who had 17 playing at Marshall. And also his pass rush win rate, while not in the top 10 in this ridiculous class, was still like good. Fourth or fifth compared to last year. It was 18.2%. It's such a lazy comp, but there's a lot of similarities with Harold Landry from Tennessee. I just don't think he's quite at that level that I thought Landry was. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
What I love about him, first of all, yes, led the FBS in sacks per game. He also led the ACC in tackles for loss. So when you look at a player, he's 248 pounds. You look like a player. You look at that kind of a player, and you expect him to be a good pass rusher, and you expect him to be slippery and get into the backfield, and he does all of those things. But the thing I really love about his game is the way he dictates terms of engagement with offensive tackles. And what I mean by that is he will slip you to the inside. He will beat you around the edge. You're like, this guy's so quick. He's smaller. He's quick. I'm having a hard time keeping him out of the backfield. And the next thing you know, you're taking a deeper step, or you're kind of holding back a little bit to try to counter that athleticism and that explosiveness. And he shoots those 34-inch arms on you, and he stands you up with that explosive burst. And all of a sudden you're like, is this 248-pound kid stacking me right now in the run game? And yep, he sure is, man. I just like the way he sets things up. And it's in the run game as much as it is in the pass game. That's what really took me back, is that. And
he was second on the team with 80 tackles and 20 and a half tackles for
man.
loss. Yeah. I mean, that's
80 tackles, because he can win in so many ways. He's going to beat you to the inside gap. He's going to beat you around the outside. And again, you're trying to counter that. And you do that as an offensive lineman by taking a deeper step, by, sitting back a little bit, trying not to get so far out that he can come, he can beat you off the ball. And the next thing you know, he shoots those arms. He's standing you up, and it's kind of out of nowhere. And then what do? Do you put two blockers on him? Well, his alignment makes that pretty tough to do, man. And then you run away from him. Good luck. That kid closes in pursuit super well. He gets down the line and makes plays chasing running backs super well. I knew he was going to be good. The more I already liked what I had seen, and then the more I dug in on his tape, I was like, if I'm going to take a chance on a shorter guy, I'm going to take a chance on a shorter guy with outrageous production, with long arms, a great motor, and great tape. I think I get what you're saying. And there are times I see it too. If you're a 325-pound guy or a 315-pound guy, and you can get your hands on him, he's in trouble. He's light. He's short. Mm-hmm. Good luck getting your hands on him. That's all I'm going to say. Good luck getting a fit on that guy.
30 guys. 36 guys, I guess. 36 guys we have with grades in the first 3 rounds. Defensive tackle, edge. This group is special. It really is. So, as I said before, stop with this class isn't that good, because it's loaded. And this is what NFL teams that are successful, this is when this is a heist. This is like the gold rush. I'm telling you, like the guys that do this at a high level, Howie Roseman, right? Brett Veach, Schneider, go down. I mean, like
Les Snead, what he did last year.
Les Snead, 2 of them from the same school. Let's go get our guys. We're back to using draft picks.
Yeah. Still the greatest t-shirt of all time, though.
Billy Bean, Eric DaCosta, Nick Caserio learned from a pretty good one in Belichick. All those,
Yeah.
Bills, we can debate his drafting record and all that stuff, but like the premise was always there. Let's get these big guys up front, and we're loaded this year. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this, for downloading, for liking, for subscribing. Please, if you haven't done it, it takes 30 seconds, maybe 20. If you're good, if you're like one of my kids, it's like 8 seconds. Like, all right, give us some love. We really appreciate all the support, though, truly. And we're excited for this next couple weeks, and we're excited to bring you the best content we can possibly provide. Muench, love you, brother.
Love you too, man.
You ready for this run?
I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm excited. It's going to be great.
It would not be draft season if you weren't a little nervous and excited. So we're in a good place. All right. We'll see you soon. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 1-800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.